Transport Secretary Grant Shapps has denied the government has reneged on promises to upgrade rail links for the North and the Midlands. Boris Johnson was accused of a betrayal after it was announced on Thursday that the eastern leg of the HS2 high-speed rail line was being scrapped and the northern powerhouse rail link from Manchester to Leeds downgraded. However, Mr Shapps insisted the government was fulfilling its pledges and that both projects would go ahead. Now, I really wouldn't want to be a Member of Parliament for the Conservative Party in one of the red wall seats.
Could you imagine such a thing?
Well, in these most awful circumstances, because levelling up was promised. And it did seem to me, Deanna, that I never got HS2 London to Manchester. I just never got it. You know, a cost of massively over 100 billion just to get to Manchester 25 minutes more quickly. I never got it. But I did think that link up through the West Midlands, East Midlands, up into Yorkshire and beyond made sense. That's not going to happen. There's no levelling up, and you lot are furious with Boris. Is that right?
Well, there's certainly a lot of frustration amongst a lot of my kind of northern red wall. I'm being diplomatic, Nigel. You should try it sometime.
Why? No, go for it.
I think we need to look at this kind of from the bigger picture. Yes, the eastern leg was kind of promised and that now isn't going ahead. Like you, I've always been quite sceptical of HS2 anyway. I think we need to stop focusing on London when it comes to national transport, look at what's going on elsewhere in the country. So for me, that sort of Leeds to Manchester has been something that's much more important. And actually, going even further, Liverpool to sort of Newcastle, Liverpool to Hull would be kind of ideal to get that line sorted. And so there is a lot going on. There's a lot of infrastructure work that's going to be going on, track replacement, electrification, which is going to really improve things. So I think the journey time from Leeds to Manchester is still going to be cut from 55 minutes down to 33 minutes. Under the Northern Powerhouse Rail, it would have been cut to 29 minutes. So realistically, there is still some really good work going on. I think it's kind of been lost in the furore about HS2 and so-called broken promises. But it's got to be about what it means for people on the ground. And if you are travelling Leeds to Manchester and you're still going to save sort of, 20-ish minutes on your journey, that is a substantial saving. But I think we do need to consider this in two aspects. One is bigger picture, how many people are actually going to use this, and looking at even more local transport, looking at bus networks, looking at local rail, and obviously we're looking at opening some of those beaching line stations and tracks at the moment, which is going to be really important for some of those local communities that struggle with other forms of transport. But I think the thing that's really difficult about this is this notion of kind of broken promises, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is really tough. And we know that circumstances change. We know that, from the point of a manifesto being issued and decisions being taken several years down the line, things do change. But I think it's that sort of, looking at the facts that I think it's a cost saving of £18 billion not doing the HS2 eastern leg, and yet London's getting £33 billion for Crossrail 2 when London transport links are pretty good.
There's going to be a sense, I think, of people in the north feeling, with a poor relation again. We've been sidelined again. It's all about London. I understand that sense of betrayal. But I have to say, I've always felt from the beginning that HS2 was a bit of a folly and a really kind of expensive folly. It just struck me that it's something that's probably ill-suited to our nation. We're a fairly small island. We're not France. France is, geographically much, much bigger than us and can accommodate that kind of high-speed rail system, I think, much, much better than we can. I've just never really seen the purpose of it. Saving 20 minutes off a journey doesn't strike me as being a substantial amount. And especially in this day and age now where people are doing meetings through various online platforms, there seems, less of a need for it than ever.
Yeah, I think that's
work
actually...
from home, yet build HS2.
Well, I think it's a really good point, Paul, and actually something that we probably need to focus on more is making sure that the connectivity along the train routes is actually decent. Because if you're on a train for 2.5 hours, but you've got faultless signal all the way through and can do those meetings, does it matter if it's 2.5 hours versus an hour and a half, really, if you can still use that time productively?
Yeah. I would love to see the money spent on a council house building programme, for example. We've got a chronic lack of housing in this country. Spend it on building council houses, investing in infrastructure and jobs in the north. That's where I would like to.
Or broadband. What about broadband? Yeah. I bet parts of your constituency have got terrible broadband.
Well, absolutely. Hutton, Magna and Ovington, I've been working with them for almost 2 years now on trying to get decent broadband where they can actually download and upload things, which is almost impossible for them at the moment. There is some good work going on Project Gigabit, etc., but I think we can be going a lot faster.
I think on connectivity, actually, Arlene probably wants to come in there because she certainly has raised issues over Northern Ireland and Scotland in terms of connectivity.
Well, and bridges, Arlene. Boris was going to these grand architectural projects, including, of course, a link between Northern Ireland and Scotland. He's gone very quiet on that one, hasn't he?
Well, apparently the Union Connectivity Review from Sir Peter Hendy will report this week. It was to come in the summer. It's coming this week. But surprisingly, shockingly, it appears that the fixed link between Scotland and Northern Ireland will not go ahead because it is, in quotes, too technically difficult, which means that it would cost an enormous amount of money. DN is talking about saving 18 billion. It would be billions upon billions of pounds to do that fixed link. And I mean, the problem with this is that not just this Prime Minister, but other Prime Ministers, particularly around HS2, have overpromised and underdelivered. And whilst there are going to be improvements, and Diana has outlined them in relation to the rail network, and I think that should be a great celebration, because you're not getting what was promised. Actually, it seems to be a lot less, and that's why people are feeling short-changed. So I really hope that the Union Connectivity Review from Sir Peter Hendy does actually look at the connectivity between Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales and England to see what can be done to improve that. Of course, in the budget, we had the reduction in air passenger duty, which benefits those of us who have to come over from Northern Ireland. I know that some Labour politicians were very dismissive of that and said that we should have been concentrating on rail. But because we're not getting the fixed link between Northern Ireland and Scotland, I think me coming by rail is going to be a little more difficult, Nigel.
Well, I think it's a question of how long that journey would take you, Arlene, as well. Goodness.
Exactly. And I mean, we did touch on broadband there, and I think it is important to say that when we talk about infrastructure, it's the infrastructure of the 21st century, and broadband infrastructure is very much a critical part of that. And that's why, if we go back to the confidence and supply agreement that we had with the Conservative Party, we spent a lot of our time trying to get money into Northern Ireland for a better infrastructure for broadband. And there's me plugging my own CNS agreement deal again.
Yeah, I mean, broadband and even mobile phone reception.
Yes.
I mean, I've been to Namibia, which is one of the most depopulated countries in the world, and the mobile phone reception is much better than it is even in London, let alone out in the Shires. And if we're going to spend... I mean, Paul, I get your point about the housing crisis. I completely get your point. But rather than spending over 100 billion on HS2, I think to actually connect up the country and give people a chance to set up their businesses and to be able to compete, you know, with those who've got good cell phone connections, got good broadband. To me, that would be, to me, the 21st century investment.
It also, importantly, Nigel, it allows people to work across the UK if you do have that infrastructure in place, so that all the jobs are not concentrated in London. I know now of people who their job is in London, but they're working in Northern Ireland because they've got good connectivity where they are. So I think that has to be looked at as well if we're serious about taking some of those jobs out of London.
Yeah, absolutely.